Okay, so as I said before, we're going to have a wee think about why traditional productivity advice often fails the ADHD brain. We'll have a wee think about the practical strategies for planning, focus, task initiation, work out ways that we can recognise burnout in ourselves, and how we can support recovery as well. We'll have a wee section at the end for questions and answers. So, how do we understand procrastination? So, when we think about procrastination, people often assume that it's about laziness or a lack of motivation. However, for people with ADHD, procrastination is very, very rarely about not caring. More often, it's linked to executive dysfunction or differences with how our brain organises information, prioritises tasks, initiates those tasks, or sustains attention. Other common barriers to kind of procrastination or avoidance of completing tasks is things like overwhelm, uncertainty about where to begin. We might struggle with things like perfectionism or difficulty regulating our attention as well. Many people know exactly what you need to do. You know, how many times have you been in the situation where you're looking at your to-do list thinking, where do I start? The challenge is actually bridging the gap between the intention and then our actions. So understanding that difference is really incredibly important, because what it does is it helps us as individuals shift our blame away from us feeling that we're unable or we're incapable towards understanding that we just need to do things slightly differently to, and maybe in a different, more practical way to allow us to engage with the activities and the tasks that we want to do. So, why does traditional productivity advice fail? Most people will have come to this stage in life, especially in adulthood, where they'll have tried all the strategies out there. They'll have Googled or asked ChatGPT, or, you know, they'll be taking tips from friends or family about how to become more productive. But the difficulty we have is that traditional productivity advice is really built around the assumptions that really don't match how a neurodivergent brain works. So these systems assume that motivation is going to be really consistent from day to day. They will rely really heavily on things like willpower and self-discipline. They will rarely account for things like fluctuating energy levels, changes in cognitive load, sensory demands, or even things like executive function and challenges. And perhaps most importantly, when these strategies don't work, what ends up happening is that we blame ourselves, and it has an impact on our self-esteem, can make us feel really shameful. It can really reinforce that belief that we're somehow failing and that we're just not getting it right, or that we're not good enough, and that's really not the case. The issue is usually not the person, it's the mismatch between the strategy you're trying to use and the neurodivergent brain that's using it. So, what do? We need to work out a way to work with your brain and not against it. So, a more helpful question, rather than asking yourself, you know, what should I do? Instead, we ask, what helps my brain start? So, this is a really subtle but powerful shift in the way that we think. So, rather than forcing ourselves to fit a system, what we do is we try and adapt that system to fit ourselves and fit that individual person. So, this works for you as an individual, it'll also work for your kids as well. What are your motivators? Your focus really becomes on reducing friction. So, reducing demand, perception, increasing visibility, and creating environments that actually support success. So when we design our supports around how our brain naturally functions, instead of trying to do what a neurotypical brain is wanting to do, those tasks become easier to initiate and sustain. Now, there's lots of different things that I'm sure you've read over the years about different strategies that might be helpful for improving motivation or increasing stamina, or, you know, all of these different things. But as I said earlier, a lot of these things will focus very much so on a neurotypical brain, one that doesn't thrive on dopamine particularly to engage or to sustain attention in tasks. And that can be really, really tricky. So some of the strategies that might be useful, what we need to think about is energy management, first of all. So most valuably, one of the shifts that we can make is moving from time management to energy management. You know, you hear day to day, I'm sure you've had conversations in the classroom or in your workplace. They'll say, you know, you really need to be very efficient at time management. Well, what does that mean? For lots of people who have ADHD, time is a very, very abstract thing, and the passing of time is really hard to grasp. And it's not that you don't understand what 5 minutes is, it's just the ability to recognise that time passing in reality can be different. How many times have you started something and thought, oh, just squeeze this in before I have to go and do, and the next thing you know, you're running late to your next task? That's about our perception of time. And so many neurodivergent people are going to experience significant fluctuations in things like your energy, your focus, your cognitive capacity throughout the day. So instead of expecting the same level of performance all of the time, what we can start to do and what can be really useful to do is to start identifying those patterns. So notice throughout your day, when are my focus and motivation naturally higher? Some people that might be first thing in the morning, other people that might be later in the day, some people it might be around lunchtime. Have a little think and map out when your productivity, when you notice that you've got a little bit more energy. Can you then take a step further than that and start putting demanding tasks during those periods of time? So if you know that you're going to be particularly motivated in the mornings, you've been up, you've done your morning routine and you're good to go for the day, you maybe got a couple of hours window of really kind of effective, productive time in the day. See if you can fit in the things you need to do, the essentials, whether that be work tasks, home tasks, within those kind of motivated windows. It's also really important to plan recovery alongside productivity. So quite often we see rest as a reward for being productive. It's actually not at all. It's what makes that productivity possible. Encouraging good enough standards can also help reduce that need for perfectionism and help people move kind of forward rather than getting really stuck. So rather than expecting ourselves to run at 60 miles an hour for 8 hours of a day at work, recognize you're going to have 40% of that you'll manage at 60%. For maybe 2 hours of that, you're going to manage 40%. And plan your day accordingly. Recognize that you are going to have time for some of that recovery in there as well. Making breaks to step away from your desk, making sure that you're not trying to focus for extended and really prolonged periods at a time, and incredibly useful as well. Even if it's down to sitting for 15-minute bursts, 15 minutes of productivity is much better than half an hour of procrastination. So utilising and recognising those patterns in yourself, and they're going to be different for everybody, is what can start to make a shift in how you feel about how productive you actually are. Thinking about how you can build yourself an external brain. So working memory, we know, can be a really significant challenge for people with ADHD. Holding lots of pieces of information in mind while you're trying to complete a task uses a huge amount of emotional and mental energy. And this is where having an external brain becomes really useful. The example I always give to the patients that I work with are, you imagine you're watching the television. Now, it's a bit different now that we have advanced technology and we can pause and record and rewind television. But, think back to when we couldn't do that. We would have 5 channels or 4 channels, some of us might remember. And to watch a programme, you had to watch it from beginning to end. But if you had 3 programmes on 3 different channels that you wanted to watch at the same time, the only way to watch those all together would have been to flick between the channels. You're never going to remember all the information from each programme. You're never going to pick up every single bit of information from every single channel at the same time. That's kind of what your brain's trying to do. You have lots of ideas pinging in and out, and your brain's focusing on them for little snapshots and then moving on to the next thing. And it just makes it really, really difficult to organise it. How do I prioritise what's most important? Because actually what feels most important is the thing that pops into my head in that moment. So that's where things like calendars, reminders, using things like visual task lists, create yourself new routines and checklists, help yourself move forward out of your head and into the environment. The goal is not to remember everything. It's to create reliable systems that can help remember things for you. And you can then have a touch point to go back to when you know that you've got something that you should be doing, but your brain just isn't bringing it to the forefront at that point. Every piece of information stored externally is going to free up mental capacity for other tasks as well. So if your brain is really busy focusing on trying to remember what you're supposed to do, you actually minimize the amount of emotional and cognitive space that you've got to do the tasks that you need to do at that time. One of the most useful strategies in neurodiversity is something called body doubling. So it's a strategy that many people discover by accident before you even realise that there's a name for it. And actually, as I'm talking about it, you'll probably think, oh, I do that to some extent. Really, all it is simply working alongside another person, which is going to help improve your focus, your accountability, and your task initiation as well. So this might be someone like a friend or a family member, potentially a study partner, a colleague, or even like a virtual co-working session. really what you're doing, is it's not necessarily even an intentional thing, and you don't have to be doing the same thing. But you could be on the phone to a friend while you're unloading the dishwasher. You could be doing your dusting and cleaning as you're chatting to a friend, having a cup of tea on your couch. What you're doing is trying to reduce that decision load. That's equally important, because every decision is using mental energy. And thinking about how you then prepare those choices in advance. So create simple routines, establish defaults, reduce the number of decisions that you're requiring to make every day as well. And you're going to find that the less energy spent deciding means you've got more energy for focusing while you're doing it too. So thinking about how you use that body double, thinking about how you minimize the decision load in your day, is going to free up a little bit of your brain space to then think about what you actually want to do. What are the things you want to achieve, and get that sense of achievement by getting things ticked off of your list. I always emphasize body doubling because it's incredibly powerful. And once you start trying it, how many times have you found yourself being on the phone to a friend, and the next thing you look round and you've folded your laundry? These things can be incredibly powerful. One of the most important things to do, however, is recognising burnout. Now, as a society, we are terrible at acknowledging when we're heading towards burnout. What we tend to do is we tend to kind of just push those feelings down, push through the things that are feeling a bit on edge, or maybe that are feeling a bit pressure filled. And it's going to really often develop gradually rather than it be this big sudden hit of burnout. Some of those early signs include things like increasing exhaustion. Are you just more tired than usual? Are you feeling a bit more overwhelmed? Are you procrastinating more than you usually do? Are you withdrawn? Are you struggling to spend time with your family and your friends? You're not really wanting to be in those social circles in the way that you might have done before. Things like irritability, loss of motivation, difficulty recovering even after rest. You're waking up in the morning and you're just exhausted, even though you've had a good night's sleep. For neurodivergent individuals, burnout can sometimes be mistaken for worsening ADHD symptoms, and that's because it can affect things like our focus, our attention, our memory, our motivation. But actually what it is that we've got too much on our plate. We're juggling too many things, and we need to really look at what is on our plate and make a bit of room on there for us just to be able to recover. Recognising those signs early really does give us an opportunity to respond before someone reaches complete exhaustion. And what we know is the earlier we intervene, the easier that recovery tends to be. If we ignore burnout, then we are just going to keep staying on that steady train in the direction of burnout. And eventually the burnout will take over, and that'll be leading to us feeling like we can't get out of bed, or work feels impossible, or you're going to, you just feel so emotionally overwhelmed that we just can't function. So doing something about it, while it can feel incredibly frustrating to have to pause and say, what, I've got too much on my plate here. It is really, really incredibly important that you do, because you're going to burn yourself out if you don't. So what does genuine recovery actually look like? Recovery is often misunderstood. So many people believe that recovery means taking a short break and then going back to previous levels of productivity immediately, and that's really, really not the case. In reality, what genuine recovery usually involves is taking a pause and reflecting on what we're doing, looking at what's led to that burnout, and looking to how much we've had on our agenda, what's been going on at work, what's happening at home. Even the positive things can contribute towards that. And try and reduce some of those demands where possible, and allow that meaningful rest without guilt. So where I'll often talk to, like, for example, families, if you have multiple children, are you juggling everybody else's social events, getting everybody to all their clubs and activities, but you don't have any time in there for your own? That's going to lead to you feeling really exhausted. You need to have your own outlets there as well. Can you reduce the clubs by one day a week so that you have a bit of rest time and a bit of downtime together as a family, instead of having to be always on the go? Same as, if you're, a young adult who's maybe at university, are you busy trying to fit in the social calendar with the examination stuff, with your studying and working and trying to juggle all these plates, but actually you've got very little downtime in there? You're going to lead yourself into burnout, and it's really important that we recognise that. So when we are reducing that capacity, we're not talking about doing that permanently, but it's about rebuilding it gradually rather than just pushing through. So strip things back to the bare minimum. Say, right, what do I need to do day to day? What are my essentials? And start there, and slowly add new things back in. The thing that, again, we're not very good at, but is really important, is self-compassion. Quite often when we we feel like this, what we're feeling like is that we're failing. And that's not the case at all. What our brain is doing is telling us that we're taking on too much and that we are needing to take that pause. And if we don't actively choose to take that pause, our brain will make us take that pause for us. So recognizing and being a bit compassionate and being kind to yourself in there is incredibly important. Being able to say, I deserve to have the space. I deserve to take a pause and make sure that I have the mental load availability to put in place some of these strategies, think about that body double, and to think about how to um, just function day to day and get the things that I need to do done. People recovering from burnout will frequently judge themselves for not being able to do as much as you did before as well. And, that's really, really difficult to move yourself past, but it's very, very important to try. Recovery is not about getting back to normal as quickly as possible. It's about restoring your well-being in a really sustainable way and making sure that what you're doing day to day is allowing yourself some opportunities. One, to improve your productivity, to allow yourself to learn new strategies and think about the different approaches to managing lack of motivation, but also acknowledging that sometimes it does feel harder and sometimes you do need a little bit longer, and sometimes you are going to maybe overburden yourself with things that you're going to feel for the rest of the week because you think, I've done too much that day. And that's okay. There's no benefit to beating yourself up about it. You just learn from it and you move on and think, right, do you know what? Next time I'm not going to say yes to that extra ask. I'm not going to add that extra event into the calendar because I know actually ultimately what's going to happen is that I'm going to lose out on loads of really good quality time because I'm exhausted. So what can we do to help you or your family? We have loads of different families and individuals and adults across the lifespan who come to us. And our aim really is just to support families and individuals through their neurodevelopmental journey. So for families who are not sure of where to start, we do offer a free 15-minute consultation where we can get you some advice and some guidance around what's going on in your life, what types of concerns you have, and just explore different options for you. What you can do if you are seeking a wee bit greater clarity is we do provide adult ASD or ADHD assessments. We also provide mental health assessment as well. So that's something to have a think about. There are some free options for you. So you can join our Facebook support groups. There are two different groups. We've got a family group and we also have an adults group as well. You can also join our mailing list or email list to receive kind of our hot topic blogs and things. We send them out quite regularly, and we've also got lots of, we're very active on social media as well. So things like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn for your regular kind of top tips and advice. Our goal really is to help you feel empowered and supported and feel informed, and recognising that might take many different forms, and whatever feels the most comfortable for you is what to do. So I realise I have just spent all this little while speaking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen just now and come back so I can see people. Bear with me. So I'm just going to have a wee look into the questions. So Ollie, thank you so much for your question there. So you've done a test on our website. Now, the tests are not formal assessments. What they do is they give us indicators as to whether or not autism is a possibility for you. So yes, the answer to your question is that you would need to either go to the NHS or you can seek private assessment yourself to formally undertake the assessment. The assessment process is a wee bit more in-depth than the kind of quick online quiz. You would meet with someone who would go through your family history, your symptoms in childhood and in adulthood. We would be using formalised assessment tools and gathering information to work out if that's exactly what's going on, and it would be then where they would say yes or no to a formal diagnosis. Hopefully that answers your question. So Ollie, no, not at all. Burnout and procrastination is a real challenge for everybody who's neurodiverse. I think it's something that we all really can resonate with, that struggle with task initiation or focusing or paying attention, absolutely could be lots to do with ADHD, but it definitely could be a lot to do with ASD as well. Um, Caroline, I'm just having a wee read at yours here. I think that's something that lots of people also relate to. Walking away from a task is really can sometimes feel impossible to get back to. It's a really good strategy that I like that somebody shared with me once, and I can never remember who it was to credit them. But the mantra is always stuck in my head is don't put it down, put it away. And the same applies for when you start tasks, don't start it, not finish it. It's, that idea of not giving yourself a second task to do. So when you're making a cup of coffee, rather than put the jar down on the worktop, stick the lid on and pop it back in the cupboard. And then it's already back. You've done the one step rather than doing the two. Stephanie, that's a really great point. If you're on your own, then there's loads of things you could do. Put things on like podcasts, or there are some great resources out there. So you go onto YouTube, you can actually search up for like body double conversations, and someone who like chit chat alongside you, to kind of keep your brain busy as you're doing something. But exactly as Michelle has said there as well, things like music, the TV on in the background, just having some sort of movement or something else going on in the room can be useful too. So Tita, you've got two questions there. So we have, even after recovery, how to cope with the guilt of leisure. Even when I have done all my work, I'm on my free time away. I know, and that's something. So what Tita said here is that the feelings of shame and guilt when she's got that downtime and she's got that recovery, it's really difficult to get out of the mindset of feeling like that you owe your time to other people. And one of the things that as a society we're not very good at probably is acknowledging that we are entitled to our own time as well. We always feel like we're having to give our time to our employers or our kids or our families or our friends or our social circles, whatever it is that's going on. And so it can be really, really tricky to get out of that mindset. Time is probably the most effective way of coming through that. The fact that you're acknowledging those feelings is really important as well, because you can rationalize them and you can say, yes, I'm getting those kind of feelings, they're happening, but I'm entitled to my own time, and reassure yourself of that as well. Number two, your question, Tita, was, in my experience, co-worker neurotypicals were the number one reason why I reached burnout. I know exactly what I need to accommodate my ADHD and productive in my profession, but neurotypicals in my work above me don't always understand or respect my needs, even if it only brings benefit to my work. They're just against it and coerce me to mask and follow neurotypical rules for their social comfort. How do I deal with this? It's a really difficult one, Tita, because like you say, sometimes it's about people's understanding of ADHD or autism or neurodivergence as a whole. And one of the things that we need to again think about is that there are formal channels that you can access for support. So if you feel like your management are not being supportive, they're not making reasonable adjustments, asking for something like an occupational health referral to support you within the workplace could be really useful, because they can formalise what your reasonable adjustments are. If you're not getting anywhere with that, thinking about having conversations with HR as well. The other thing that I think is sometimes really useful is just having a conversation about what your neurodivergence is. Education around neurodivergence, I'm sure, as we all know, can be really lacking in some places, and people, think that ADHD or autism or other neurodivergence is what is quintessentially shown on the television. It's what the movie caricature, you mentioned your ADHD there, Tita. It's the caricature version of what that is, and if you think back to what we thought it was previously, it was where there were naughty boys who were really boisterous and would swing off the chandeliers and would be hyperactive and impulsive and would just get themselves into bother. And actually, in reality, we know that that's not what ADHD looks like for the vast majority of people. But not everybody understands that. So in-house, and again, this is something maybe to think with HR about or with your management about, having some sort of in-house training around ADHD might be useful, helping them to understand what that actually means for you, but what it also means for other neurodivergent people in your workplace as well. Um, Stephanie, how can I book an appointment and do I know if I have ADHD or autism? So we actually have free 15-minute consultations that you can book just through our website. They're with our assistant psychology team who are brilliant, and they'll go through some questions with you. They'll have a bit of a chat and talk about what your focus of challenges are, the things that you notice about yourself that are leading you to ask the question about ADHD or autism. And what they can do is they can help kind of signpost you based on whether or not there's going to be evidence for one or the other, or potentially both. So we can, if you want to, what you can do, I don't know if you can, in the chat function, if you tap the button just above the text box that says everyone, you should be able to tick Cara Preston. If you send a message directly to Cara Preston, even just with your name and phone number, what we can do is even arrange one of the girls to give you a wee phone if you'd want to do that. So Luna J, I've been to see my doctor about a referral, but I've been waiting nearly 2 months. Is this normal? My son went to a different doctor and had the referral the same day. I did ask for right to choose. So yeah, it can be, it depends. It's maybe worth following up with your doctor to double check and see that the referral, one, just confirm the referral's actually gone to where it's gone, and which provider for right to choose it's been sent to. It can take a long time, especially through NHS processes, depending on where you're being referred to and what part of the country that you're in. Yeah. I'm just having a wee scroll through the chats here. So I feel really down, I lose motivation for anything once I stop. I need to keep going, I don't want to start again, and my mood feels really low. Jenny, yeah, I'm sure lots of people really relate to that as well. I suppose it's one of those big things, isn't it, that your brain kind of thrives on that sense of achievement and the dopamine that comes from kind of getting things done, doesn't it? And eventually we kind of sit down. I have a rule in my house. We're a neurodivergent household as well, and when I come in from work, I need to do the things I need to do because as soon as my bum hits the couch, I know that's me. My head's out of work mode, and I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to really push myself to get things done again. So in terms of iPhone 2, sorry, I don't have your name. Any tips for sleep routines? Our daughter has ADHD. She's just been diagnosed by us. So sleep routines are a really tricky one. Lots of parents and adults alike will say, the neurodivergent brain sometimes for some people just seems to not need as much sleep. But we notice that when we're not getting good quality sleep, that our ADHD symptoms are going to be much, much, much worse. There is some great information on the Sleep Action website. So on there you'll have lots of kind of sleep hygiene strategies. One of the most important things about improving sleep routines for young people is to be really consistent with it. So the average duration of time it takes for change to sleep routines is between 3 and 4 weeks. So if you're doing something different every night, you're not actually creating a routine. You need to pick something to do and stick with it for a long period of time for that to take effect. The other thing to have a wee think about is things like, are you being consistent with bedtime? Are we doing kind of nice wind down activities before bed? So things that are not going to stimulate us, but are going to help kind of slow our brain down a little bit. The other thing to think about as well is how we use the bedroom. So especially for kind of our teens or kind of kids, they'll be often up in their bedrooms, kind of keeping themselves busy. Creating your bed as somewhere that you only step into for sleep creates a really good association between your brain and bedtime. So if you're getting into bed for studying, if you're sitting on top of your bed to watch the telly, if you are sitting on your bed playing games, your brain doesn't automatically know that when it gets into it that you're going to start that sleep routine. So it gets a bit confused. And sometimes just a change as simple as that can be really powerful as well. But as I say, Sleep Action website is a great one to go to and have a wee look. They've got great resources on there and great strategies as well for thinking about how to improve sleep hygiene and quality. Joanne, I get to the end of the day and have a large amount of tabs or emails open that I started throughout the day. Yeah, that's it. Sometimes it actually feels like your brain has a lot of tabs open, never mind your computer having physical tabs open. And that, again, that's a really, really common feeling. So if I can't cope with background noise and working as an autistic trait, I've diagnosed ADHD but not been assessed for autism yet. I'm considering it as I think maybe. It's a possibility, I suppose. One of the things I think that's really interesting about neurodiversity is that an increased sensory experience. So whether that be over or under sensitivity to our senses, so that could be anything from sight to sound to touch to, anything at all, is that it's just as common in ADHD as it is in autism. And it's one of the things we talk about an awful lot being associated with ASD, but not so much with ADHD. In terms of whether or not it's worth going for that assessment, it's worthwhile booking in maybe for a 15-minute consultation and just having a conversation about it, and whether or not there's enough there that would support you going down the route of that. Any tips on how to shake the compulsion to self-sabotage with vices? Yeah, David, the old brain seeking the dopamine hits is a really tricky one, isn't it? And I suppose it's about being creative with how you get those. So, when you're getting that kind of reward every time that you're doing something, there's something about being able to create that same feedback, but in a more healthy, adaptive way. So trying to find things that give you that sense of reward, that give you that sense of achievement, that you get that pleasure and that enjoyment out of. And when you notice yourself slipping into the habit of something that's maybe a bit less helpful, trying to redirect yourself away from that. So Hayden has said, to leave a really popular advice agency charity because neurotypical managers not understanding what I need, accommodation, random, slow and lazy. Yeah. I'm sure lots of people will really relate to that. Tita, to answer your question, so we have, through Diverse Diagnostics, we've got our free Facebook parent and adult groups. So depending on whether you're looking for yourself or for a young person, you're welcome to join one of those. The other place to have a wee look is ADHD UK. They're the biggest charity for ADHD in the United Kingdom, and they have lots of information on there about face-to-face resources and support, and online groups as well that are set up in your areas. Do you have any advice on how to work out what reasonable adjustments? So Patrick, that's a great question, and unfortunately the short answer to that is probably no, other than to speak to your occupational health team. So each workplace is unique and everybody is going to have different levels of management and who's around and what they can do. But it's definitely worth reaching out to either your HR or your occupational health department to have an assessment to see what do they need to do to understand you and to make those reasonable adjustments that work for you, because your reasonable adjustments are going to be totally different from someone else's. Hayden has said, I did an ADHD and ASD assessment this month. I was diagnosed with combined ADHD and not autism. Is it reasonable to ask for a second opinion? And are there an overlap of symptoms? Yeah, so I mean, if you feel like you need a second opinion, it's entirely your prerogative to do that. You're more than entitled to. I would always encourage us to go back and ask for an explanation as to why there was a no to the autism question first, and see if the person who's done the assessment can just give you a little bit more time and answer that question for you. To answer the second part of your question, yeah, there's a huge overlap between ADHD and autism. There's a really great website, actually, it's called Neurodivergent Insights. And if you do a quick Google and type Neurodivergent Insights, Misdiagnosis Monday, ADHD versus Autism, it shows you a kind of concentric circles, like a Venn diagram. And on the outside parts of the circles are our differences, and on the centre are the similarities. And there's about 5 differences down either side and about 30 similarities up the middle. So quite often what we understand, and when we're looking at ADHD and autism, is we're actually looking for the differences. We're not looking for the similarities when we're undertaking the assessment. And that might be why there's maybe a bit of a difference there. But your person who has done your assessment should be able to go into that and give you a bit of an explanation around that. And absolutely, if you still feel that you don't agree with the outcome, then you're welcome to a second opinion. As with any health condition, you're welcome to a second opinion if that's what you choose. Got time for just a couple more questions, so I'm going to just keep going down. Let's see. So we don't have a template document for tracking energy management as opposed to time management sheets, but that's probably something that you will be able to find on a quick Google. Or what I would suggest is even using, your calendar on your phone. So your calendar is already set up with nice time slots, and you'll be able to kind of get an access. You can change that to look at either a 5-day view or a 7-day view, depending if you're trying to work it out across your working week, or if it's a full week or whatever you're trying to look at. You can also then block it down into individual days as well, and you can kind of section off times. What you could do is use like different colours when you're kind of adding time. So if you've got like high energy times, make it one colour, low energy times, make it another colour, or kind of mid energy times, make it something different again. And that way, as you're kind of scrolling through, you'll be able to maybe see any patterns that are emerging. Any tips for how best to manage a household with one parent and likely to teenagers with ADHD dealing with the other parent who is a shift worker? Is there anything specific, Sarah? Is it just the lack of predictability around the shift working? Is there something specific about that would be helpful to know?
Probably all of the above, all of what you've said, really. Yeah, it's the unpredictability of it. It's the effect on sleep. Lots and lots of different things. I just wondered if you've ever come across any hints or tips to help with that, because it's quite difficult.
I can imagine. Are the kids quite young? Teenagers, you said?
17 and 15. So no, they're not. They were very unsettled by it when they were little. So we had, when's daddy coming home? When's daddy coming home? Because it changed. There's no regularity to it. They're all over the place. And so they've got like a calendar that they obviously they can read now, but it's just still the unpredictability, mainly, I guess, for me. One week I'm always doing everything, the next week maybe not so much, and then it's just all over the place.
It's constant, I know, and that's maybe where to look at kind of what are your must-dos and what are your would-like-tos, and have a bit of a plan for, right, okay, these are the things that I need to do, and, basic things like making sure we've got clean dishes, making sure we've got clean clothes, that kind of stuff, and kind of maybe getting rid of some of the stuff that are the optional things on the weeks where you know that your partner's not about. Just to lighten that burden a wee bit on yourself. I think it's a great idea, and you actually are already doing exactly what I was going to suggest for the kids, getting something visual. But obviously shift patterns and having a partner that works offshore can be incredibly unpredictable, or working random shifts, or doing, whatever. And like you say, that horrible question, I think most parents will have experienced at some point. When's mummy coming home? When's daddy coming home? And, you understand that it's not always easy necessarily to contact people depending on the line of work when they're away as well. And that can create a wee bit of unpredictability too. So even trying to introduce something, obviously with having older kids, I'm sure they've got their own phones and they can kind of reach out to them whenever they want to. But maybe having like set times where he'll definitely check in with you guys might be useful as well. But it's really tough. But it sounds like you're doing a good job. Can or does medication for ADHD autism help with managing the issues you've spoken about today? So Maureen, there is no medication to manage ASD, but there is medication to manage ADHD, and yes, absolutely. So medication, I say to everybody, is not a silver bullet. It's not going to be the answer to all your prayers, and it's not going to take away ADHD, but certainly it can help with things like increasing motivation, increasing your ability to have an idea, think through it, act on it, and then complete a task. So that's part of what ADHD medication can be really, really helpful with. Yeah. But as I say, it's not the answer to everything. It's not the golden nugget. So from a diagnostic point of view, we aim to see and start a process within 4 weeks. Usually our kind of standard time frame would be about 4 to 6 weeks from the beginning of your assessment to the end of your assessment. And then, if you're choosing to go down a medication route, you can kind of book into that pathway next. There's not really a kind of time frame per se for that. Hopefully that answers your question, Sarah, and I can. Magnesium beneficial for someone with ADHD, and if so, how does it help, and what's the recommended type of magnesium? So we don't give specific recommendations around supplements. There is lots of anecdotal evidence out there for lots of different supplements, but it's not something that we would provide recommendations on. What I would suggest to do, Maureen, is to have a conversation with your GP, your primary health practitioner, the other place, if you're looking at kind of alternative remedies for things. Your people who work within, places like Holland and Barrett, or places like that specialise in alternative kind of herbal remedies. They're your people to ask about that kind of thing. So, Stephanie, in terms of assessment, I'm assuming you mean going through the NHS route. Not really. You have to access through your GP. So, if you live in an area where right to choose is a thing, which is England and Wales, then you're welcome to kind of ask your GP to refer you for assessment through right to choose, and they'll route you into a private provider that's funded through the NHS. Other than that, that's kind of the only um, it's the only way to access NHS assessment. It is obviously your own prerogative if you choose to do that privately. And with most private providers like ourselves, there's not a significant waiting time to do that. But obviously there's a financial cost that's involved. So it's kind of up to yourself. Does anybody else have any more questions? So Tita, the assessment process with ourselves, are you asking for an adult or for a child?
Adult.
Hi. Adult, perfect. So the assessment process is really straightforward with ourselves. So what we do, we always encourage everybody to do the 15-minute free session to begin with anyway. We're a really patient-centric company and we don't want to be sending people down a journey that wouldn't be suitable for them anyway. So we would always try and make sure that you're on the most appropriate pathway. So we give those 15-minute sessions. As I say, it's just a phone call check-in with one of our assistant psychologists, and they'll run through kind of some basic screening questions, understand any challenges that you're experiencing, what are the things that lead you to believe that that might be something that's relevant for you, and try and help make sure that you've got evidence from the right sources and things that would allow you to get the diagnostic criteria for ADHD specifically, and ASD is quite tight. So once we've done that, what happens is we then book in with a consultant. We've got some screeners we'll send you in the meantime. So there's some questionnaires that go out to you. They go to an observer as well. So that would be somebody who's known you pre-age 12 or somebody that knows you really, really well. And you would fill them out. You would come and see one of our consultants. It's a 90-minute appointment and they will undertake your family history. They'll go through some questionnaires with you at that appointment as well. That is kind of a formatted assessment that they do there. And then they will be able to say yes or no. So as long as we've got all the information, the screeners and questionnaires and things before that appointment, it's that one-off appointment for adults. It does take a wee bit longer for children, but the full appointment's a 90-minute appointment usually. Sometimes we might need a wee bit more time, and obviously the consultant would let you know, depending on complexity, if there's other things that are going on, if there's maybe additional information that they need. Or we also do an enhanced assessment, which is where, say for example, you don't have someone that can talk or vouch for what you were like when you were really little. We do something called a QB check, which is a gold standard part of an assessment now in the UK. And basically it's a kind of 20-minute to half an hour little kind of puzzle thing you do on a website. And you do that as a separate appointment with one of our assistant psychologists. And it will kind of give us a probability of whether or not it picks up things like your attention, focus, your concentration, your movement, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of recording all that in the video as you're going, and it will give us a probability of whether or not you are likely to have ADHD or not. So on its own, it's not a diagnostic kind of assessment, but when you pair that inside the rest of the assessment, it gives us a pretty good kind of pointer to yes or no as well. So it can be one session, sometimes a little bit longer if there's more complexity, I suppose, is the short answer. But that's very much the process. And then you get your full report. One of the big things with ourselves is that we make sure that your reports, one, our assessment process fits with the NHS standards, and two, your report also fits with the NHS recommended standards to ensure that we do as much as we can to support you access NHS care after your assessment as possible. We can never guarantee that they're going to be able to accept your report, or no one can, but it's we make sure that one, all of our consultants have worked or do work within the NHS as well, and two, we actually follow their guidelines as to what's required for the reports and the assessment process to make sure that what we are doing is very much in keeping with what you should be having done. No worries. Does anybody else have any? How long are the ADHD reports, Sarah? How long is a piece of string? It depends on how much information is there really. So our reports will include everything. Our consultants are really, really thorough. They will include everything from the screening information that's been gathered. If you've had your QB check, there's a separate part of your report for that. It will include all of your developmental history. It will include all of the presenting symptoms to date. We also undertake a mental health assessment as part of it as well, because we have to rule in and rule out anything else to think about potential differential diagnosis. So your report will have all of that information to give you. I couldn't give you an exact page number, but it's certainly not a one-page document that you come away with at the end of that. And what we also do as well at the end is give you some recommendations around next steps and what might be useful for you based on what you've talked about with your consultant. Okay, so I'm going to tie things up there. Thank you so much to everybody for coming along tonight. I really appreciate everybody being here. If you have any questions, please feel free just to drop us a little call or pop us an email, or feel free to hop onto the website. We're always available and contactable, and as I say, your 15-minute consultations are free of charge, so if you are thinking about assessment, it's worthwhile getting booked into one of those just to have a discussion and get a wee bit more detail specific to your own circumstances. Thanks everyone. Have a lovely night. I hope everybody enjoys the sun.